Two. Thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim Nakrin, joined today by attorney Erica Wilson. Thanks so much for being with us. We brought you in today. Well, first of all, because it's just always an honor to have you. But also, we've been following the latest updates with the YSL trial. And as always, I mean, there's always some sort of drama happening with the YSL trial. But the latest thing that we have been following is a key witness is at Grady Memorial Hospital. And his attorney has been asking for him to essentially be freed. And the person that we're talking about is Quindarrius Zachary, and he's also known as Little D. And he apparently has a severe case of sickle cell anemia, sickle cell disease, according to his attorney. And so he's been at Grady for treatment. And some of the comments his attorneys have made as they've been petitioning to the court to basically let him free. His attorney, Dennis Schieb, who spoke exclusively to Atlanta News First, has said, quote, prosecutors want him to testify, and something that he supposedly said years ago. I don't know if he even remembers it. I've talked to him. He's been through so much. He's been drained physically. He's been drained mentally. They want him to testify. It's not worth his life to get up there. It goes on to say if he's made to go back to jail, there's a good chance he will die because they can't deal with medical situations there like this. And obviously, Erica, we've been covering the various issues with the Fulton County Jail that is now under federal investigation by the Department of Justice, and numerous inmates have died there. So, there does seem to be some valid concern by his attorney, but what's going to happen with this particular witness, in your opinion, and just kind of in the context of a case that is record long?
This is so very hard to tell because everything about this case is just so unusual. You don't typically see someone asking for an arrest or to compel the court, to have the court compel a witness to be there. Even if I've had witnesses completely not show up, and I've never asked for a warrant for their arrest to have them present evidence. So this is a case of first impression for most attorneys to even deal with, criminal attorneys who've been doing this for decades. And typically you would only do this because the burden that you would have to demonstrate to the court is that this person is purposefully going to evade testimony. Well, we know now he's in a hospital, so I don't know if they're going to wheel him in on a gurney to have him testify. I don't know how much pressure the state is going to put on the court to force him to testify. But again, the state is still not rested. They're still very much in the midst of calling witnesses. I believe they still have dozens of more witnesses to call, so we don't know if they will just delay calling him as a witness and maybe put him towards the end once he's recovered and maybe a little bit better, or if because they don't have to call witnesses in order. You can call witnesses out of order all the time. And so I think probably what will likely happen under this particular set of facts is they may just give him some time to see how well he recovers, and then if he's up to testify, have him come in.
Yeah, I mean, and you're talking about just kind of the order of witnesses, and we also know that witnesses can be recalled, so they could be called and then called back again. So that's a whole other thing. But speaking of witnesses, it seems like witnesses are becoming more important because time passes, things happen, things change, people move away, and people pass away. Case in point, the Atlanta community remembering the life of Rich Homie Quan, who was slated to be a witness in this trial, and he passed away fairly unexpectedly. He was a fairly young man, so it was really a shock to the community, and still a lot to be uncovered about what exactly happened. But he was listed as a possible witness in this historically long YSL trial, in which he was facing 8 criminal counts under a federal law, it's really, it just kind of speaks to kind of how layered this case is. I mean, what is it kind of, what does it do in terms of impacting this trial?
Well, again, and I don't know if Rich Homie Quan would have been considered a material witness in that, or what level of information he may have had. But it would have to suffice to say that when you have as many witnesses as the state has already called, and when you have as many witnesses as they plan to call, add to that the witnesses that all of the defense attorneys plan to call. I believe if the state is doing their job properly, then they should be able to prove their case without, Rich Homie Quan's testimony. I believe the testimony of the gentleman that's in the hospital right now was very specific to what they're covering right now, which was that 2015 drive-by shooting. And that's why they're trying to get him in, I guess, to kind of keep, and that's important. We can call witnesses out of order, but when we're on a particular focus for the, particularly more so for the jurors to be able to remember, because these jurors, bless their hearts. I mean, they're in it for the long haul, and so you don't want to have to keep circling back and having them recall testimony from months ago. So I understand the importance of wanting to get him in now, but I don't know the level of importance. For Richard McQuan, may he rest in peace. That was definitely very unfortunate. But again, if the state is doing their job, they should be able to prove their case in chief with, hundreds of witnesses. If you can't prove your case with hundreds of witnesses, then y'all just need to go home right now.
Right. I mean, that is a massive case. And just because we were talking about Rich Homie Quan, we should say that what happened was in September of 2014, his father, Corey Lamar, was injured when he was apparently, his barbershop was targeted in a shooting. So apparently Fulton County prosecutors have been trying to link that incident to an alleged criminal, criminal enterprise that they've been trying to, of course, prove in court, led by Young Thug is what they're alleging. So, who knows how that incident is going to kind of come into play in terms of what the prosecution's argument is going to be. But, we're talking about the fact that they have hundreds of witnesses that they could potentially call. And, you're talking about a huge body of evidence. But it also seems like the risk could be confusing the jury, especially as this gets more and more long and drawn out.
Absolutely, because you're going to ask jurors to have to recall something that we're covering now. What is this, September? We don't know when they may get around to getting that gentleman back in the hospital. So then you have to kind of, it's not efficient for attorneys to have to keep going back and refreshing the jurors' recollection on these type of things. But in terms of, with Rich Homie Quan, again, I don't know how material he would have been. Perhaps his father, I'm not sure if his father's on the list, may have been able to provide more insight as to that actual shooting. But I would probably bet to say typically understanding street code, particularly amongst rappers. I think his testimony would have been much like what we've seen last week, where it's a lot of I don't recall.
Yeah, we would have to see about that. But, can you believe, because now we're in September,
Right.
It was November 27th of 2023 that the case in chief began. So we're almost a year. I mean, we're not too far off from a year into this trial already. So we'll see. I mean, it's not moving fast. Any other observations as this thing has unfolded? I mean, and we're on the third judge now as well.
We're on the third judge. Everything about this case just is very frustrating, just particularly in terms of how long it's taking the state to be able to put forth their case in chief. But there's a lot of witnesses. The state is not really getting a lot of. This is also what's unprecedented is they're calling attorneys. You very rarely see attorneys being called to have to testify, and we're seeing that in these cases. And there was a lot of back and forth with Judge Whitaker and the District Attorney Love about her not calling more attorneys, because that's just something typically you don't do, because it compromises the attorney, because we can't give a whole lot of information because it's subject to attorney-client privilege. So at this point, it looks like the state is probably spinning their wheels and calling a lot of unnecessary witnesses, particularly by calling attorneys to the stand to testify, so that to me it's just like, I feel like now the state is just kind of grasping at straws.
I've had people ask, why hasn't there been a mistrial declared? Because there have been so many issues. We saw the whole issue that eventually led to Judge Ural Glanville getting removed, those ex parte meetings. And that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. But I just wonder, is it because essentially judges don't want to have to start from scratch? Because if they declare mistrial, then this thing can go again.
That's exactly correct. I mean, you got to understand the case in chief started in November of last year, but
Correct.
Jury selection started way earlier than that.
Yes.
So if you want to toll all the time, come January, we'll be almost 2 years deep into this thing, and who would want to go through the hassle having to find 12 jurors and a couple of alternates who will be able to kind of go back through this and give almost a 2-year commitment of their life.
Yeah, rerun the last 2 years.
Right.
And then however many years it takes to get to, the finish line.
Exactly.
And the prosecution probably knows by that time their case is going to kind of fizzle out because, like you say, people, it does lose steam. It loses momentum. It also, witnesses move away, their memories fade, all that sort of thing. They pass away, like we saw with Rich Homie Quan. Yeah,
absolutely. So all of those things are factors for consideration when the court is kind of considering whether or not to do a mistrial. I mean, it would be absolute heartbreak to have to start over. So I'm not surprised that to the extent that they were able to salvage it without asking for a mistrial, they would definitely do that, because I don't even think the state or any of the defense attorneys, want to do that. I don't want them to do that. Keith Adams, who's representing Young Thug himself, I referred so many cases to him, and I have people calling me saying, he can't appear in court because he is stuck there. And so it's a trickle down effect that's impacting a lot of people.
The
in
criminal
this particular
justice system.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts before we let you go?
Like I said, this is a case of first impression. It's interesting to see how all this plays out. I certainly hope the gentleman who's hospitalized gets well soon. And so we will all kind of keep a lookout to see, hopefully, that the state won't try to force him to testify from a gurney being run in an ambulance. So
for sure,
we will see.
Yeah, and Attorney Erica Wilson, what kind of cases, whenever you do your appearances, people want to know what kind of law do you practice, what kind of cases are you open to taking?
So you can contact me at the Fairness Firm. We do civil rights, we do personal injury, we do medical malpractice. My background is in family law, so I still do have some family law cases. So if you have any of those issues, give us a call.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Attorney Erica Wilson, for
Absolutely.
joining us with your analysis and more on, of course, the YSL trial and all your top stories on AtlantaNewsFirst.com. We are streaming the YSL trial gavel to gavel on our special events stream on ANF+. Thanks for joining us.